Hello, I'm Janet Morano, the Executive Director of Priests for Life, and welcome to Just Ask Janet. Well, today's topic is one that I know a lot of people feel that we don't talk about enough. We try to sweep it under the rug, so to speak. It's about miscarriage. When a woman has lost a baby to miscarriage, very often our response doesn't help them. Okay, because typically we have this response like, oh, well, it's probably for the best. Nature took its course. We almost like kind of want to brush the subject aside. And yet, I know personally, because two of my daughters have had miscarriages, it's devastating for a woman who's lost a baby to miscarriage. And yet, our language, I always say to people, well, what would your reaction be if that baby was 8 months old as opposed to 8 weeks in utero? If it was a born child at 8 months old, everybody would be, oh, how terrible. We're so sorry. What can we do for you? And of course, there would be maybe a little funeral mass and a wake or something. That's how we would act. We have to start acting the same way for miscarried babies, right? We have to. First of all, the mother's grief is the same. She's lost her child. She was bonding with this baby. Again, whether it was at 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or several months down into the pregnancy, it's the same loss for her. This was a baby that she was looking forward to having, to hold. And now the baby's gone. We have to address this like a real person, because that's what it is. It's a baby. And of course, we always say we're pro-life, from conception to natural death. But we got to walk, not just talk the talk. We got to walk the walk with these mothers. And really, what you should be saying are things like, I'm so sorry. Do you need anything? Why don't you send a sympathy card to a mother who's lost a baby to miscarriage, because she's lost her child. You should be responding the same way. Well, on today's program, we're going to delve into this, and we're going to show you that there's resources for women who find out that usually what happens is the doctor says, well, there's no heartbeat now. And they run a few more tests and say, oh, yeah, the baby's not formed, or whatever they say, tell her. And then they schedule her to go into the hospital and have a procedure. And then that's it. There's more to it than that. And joining me right now is a wonderful woman who's got a great ministry. Her name is Jill McNamara, and she's the president of Miscarriage Mothers and Others Incorporated. So, Jill, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Janet, for allowing me to have the time to talk with this subject to your audience.
Well, and like I had said, when a woman loses a child through miscarriage, very often she's given an appointment, especially if it's early on. If it's the first trimester, the doctors usually schedule a D&C at the hospital, and no discussion is ever made about she can request the remains of her child, and you can have a burial and all that. So can you tell us, what does your ministry do to help women in this circumstance?
Well, what I did first is I had a law changed here in Indiana that says within 24 hours of a miscarriage, a mother is to be told she has a right to bury her baby. And she has to tell the hospital that she wants to do it. Unfortunately, I think mothers need advocates, because in the midst of that tragedy and of that miscarriage, all those things may not get communicated. And you have to go through the same process of burying your miscarried baby, your unborn baby, just like any other parent. There is no difference. So what we do is we help them know ahead of time, should this happen to you, these are some things you should know ahead of time. And if you do need help with burying your baby, call us. You don't have to live in Indiana for us to help you. During the summer, I helped a family in Pennsylvania, which I found out in the process was also trying to pass a law like Indiana's. So what we have designed for moms have told us that too many of them have had to just flush their baby down a toilet because they had no other option. So we had a series of meetings during 2019 with mothers, and that was like their number one concern. So in response, we developed a very discreet little miscarriage kit. I can just show you how discreet it is. It's this big. It's the size of a Kleenex package. Nobody will know what it is. And what this has in it is everything she would need to retain her baby's fetal remains, to take them to the doctor and to make sure that they're processed. We hope to give them to more women's care centers, who are probably the first people to diagnose that there is no heartbeat. So mothers will be prepared.
Wow. And I mean, a kit like that, that's really only good, like we're saying, for the first trimester, correct?
Actually, the bag that is in here is a bag that is used in a hospital. It would be a hospital toilet liner, and it fills the whole toilet. So it can hold quite a bit, a baby larger than, 12 weeks or first trimester. So nobody would want to have one of these kits, that we do know. We hope and we pray as we send each one out that it's something we give you that you'll never have to use. But if you do, you're going to be better prepared.
Right. So now, in Indiana, you have this law. Just tell us a little bit about the law in Indiana. What is it called?
It is called House Bill 1190, Treatment of Miscarried Remains. What I love about it is, one of the things I got to work with, Governor Pence was our governor at the time, so that was cool. But even unlike any of our Catholic healthcare directives, this Indiana law states, and I'll just read it, that a miscarried fetus means an unborn child, irrespective of gestational age, who has died from a spontaneous or accidental death before expulsion or extraction from the unborn child's mother, irrespective of the duration of the pregnancy. So number one, Indiana law says it's not a product of conception. It's an unborn child, and it's worthy of burial. And within 24 hours, the mother is to be told what her options are. Unfortunately, and also one more thing, which is what we want to focus on more this year if the pandemic doesn't delay anything. There are a lot of hospitals in Indiana who are non-compliant with this law. It has been here since 2014, and women still are not being told they have a right to bury their baby. Or I'll get called to a hospital to take them a burial vessel, which we will also give a mother if necessary. And they've lost the fetus before I get there. So now there is no baby. I strongly advocate for any mother whose unborn baby ends up at the hospital to have somebody actually oversee what's happening to the baby, to the fetal remains, maybe have them labeled if you're taking them there yourself. Because some hospitals will tell parents, oh, we have a program, a compassionate program. Well, I found myself at one point working in the funeral and cemetery industry. That happened through following the Holy Spirit. I saw behind the scenes what was happening. And I can tell you, there is no parent who would have chosen what I saw as being provided as the free service from the hospital if they had had their choice. Commingling of fetal remains is against Catholic faith teaching. And yet, these babies are stored at hospitals for a very long duration of time before they're even buried. And they're commingled because it's more convenient.
Well, I know that to be true because Father Pavone was my parish priest in Staten Island, New York, for 5 years before he became National Director of Priests for Life. And there's a Catholic family that owns a funeral parlor on Staten Island. And one day they called Father Pavone and said, Staten Island Hospital just called us, and we're going to bury like a large quantity of miscarried babies, and we would like you to do a graveside, service for us, And that was the first we ever heard of this. And we said to them, what do you mean? And he says, well, apparently they like you're saying, they keep these miscarried remains until they have, I guess, a fair amount. And then they give them over to a funeral director to be buried. And like you're saying, well, where was the parents' rights? Wait, I want to bury my baby, right? My baby with my family plot or so. But this same funeral director, I have to say, he's wonderful because his brother's wife lost a baby all the way back in the 50s, miscarriage. And of course, he saw to it that that baby was buried. You know, he was a funeral director, but he made a promise to everyone on Staten Island, and it's still true to this day. Anyone who has a miscarried baby, to contact them, and they will bury that child absolutely with no cost to the family. They do it for free. But this was something that they got a phone call. You know, oh, we've got, I don't know, I don't even remember the number of babies it was, but Father Frank and I were like shocked, like, this is what happens? And so what you're saying, Jill, is very true. And it must be different state to state. But I guess what it means is women have to be more empowered with this information so that, God forbid, they're in a situation where they're told that there's no heartbeat, your baby has died. You know, too often, I think the medical profession, they're so callous. They're scheduling her off for a procedure she hasn't had a chance to even process. So I would say, first of all, there's no rush to have a medical procedure right away. You can wait a couple of days, right, Jill? I mean, you can wait a few days and get everything lined up and make a few phone calls and make sure that, okay, well, I want the remains of my baby. Because it sounds to me, Jill, like in some states, you have to be like an advocate for this, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. At the time we had our law passed, there were only 16 states that had fetal remain laws. And I was blessed in that we were able to get a intern from the Thomas More Society to work with us, who was already working on this subject. And they said that the law that we passed here in Indiana was by far probably the one that gave the most parent rights and was the most detailed of any of them. And if you are an Indiana resident, and God forbid that you would miscarry in another state, you need to know what your state's laws are for fetal remains. Just because you might be visiting from Indiana, and hopefully a hospital would be doing it right. But every state is different. Everything's always changing. Some people will believe that this is a pro-life legislation, but in truth, it's bereavement legislation that we have passed. And it received bipartisan, swift support. It went through Indiana House and Senate very quickly. Every parent has a right to grieve. Everybody knows somebody who's had this tragic experience. And so you need to know your state's rights wherever you're at. Whatever state you're at, please contact me. I'll try to help you figure out what your state rights are and give you anything I can to help you prepare, God forbid again, that you may experience a miscarriage, but to know what you need to know.
All right, so tell everyone now about your resources, your website, and what's offered there, and so that they kind of can hear what's available.
Well, the website does need to be updated. That I will tell everybody right up the top. And it will tell you a little bit about how we got the law passed. You can download a copy of Indiana's law, House Bill 1190. You can use it as a basis for something you may want to do in your state. We educate. Our focus is, we actually, when I found out that the law was not being followed, became a nonprofit organization. And we were blessed that the Thomas More Society provided the financial means for me to move this forward as a 501c3. So we will help parents, no matter where you are, to help you understand the law. If you need a burial vessel, we have them. I have gone to homes when the miscarriage has happened at home, and we've put the baby inside a casket and sealed it, had ceremonies at home. I've had mothers who knew they were having the D&C, told their doctor at the time, I'm going to bury these remains. The doctor didn't understand. Unfortunately, the D&C was done in Chicago, and to bring the fetal remains back to Indiana required a transit burial certificate. Now, this is very interesting, Janet, because when you have a transit burial certificate, it is a proclamation by the health department that you are burying human remains. They are not issued for anyone else. So a few years after the law that I was involved in was passed, they now require Indiana abortion facilities to have their babies treated, their fetal remains treated in the same way as miscarried remains. And so technically, those babies that are aborted at Planned Parenthood are now having to be treated like fetal remains, and they have to have a burial transit permit, which is saying we are taking dead babies from Planned Parenthood and burying them. That was, to me, profound.
Well, and so who's doing that in Indiana?
Yes. Yeah. It was law number 299. And now even in Indiana, if you are given a morning after one of the abortion pills, you have a right to take your baby's fetal remains back to the doctor or the facility that gave you that pill so your babies can be respectfully buried.
Wow. That's amazing. So
Yes.
I'm sure people watching right now, everyone knows someone who had a miscarriage. And it's very sad that they weren't empowered, because a lot of people are writing that into us right now. They're saying, I wish I knew this. I wish I knew that. I think that's the biggest tragedy, is that we don't know that we can be an advocate for our own baby. Because the medical profession, like you said, because abortion's like no big deal and all this other stuff as far as medical profession is concerned. Well, miscarriage is just part of that whole thing, and they just sweep it aside. But your website, again, is called miscarriedbaby.com. That right? Correct?
That's correct. Yes, singular, miscarried baby.
Miscarriedbaby.com. That's the website. So if they go up there, you have some basic information for them, correct?
Yes.
And they can request that kit that you held up before?
Yes. Not a problem.
Okay, perfect. And I guess if anybody wants to introduce this concept in their own state legislature, I guess you people there in Indiana, you could give them some advice, right, about how you went about it and how you got it. And I think that the clever thing is it's called a bereavement law. So it didn't get bottled up into that whole controversy. Oh, here's another pro-life law here. A bereavement law was genius, really.
Well, that came from the Holy Spirit. I take no credit for that.
Yeah. So how long have you been doing this miscarriedbaby.com, all this outreach? For how long?
Well, I started working in the funeral industry in 2004 and then transitioned into the cemetery industry. So at the funeral home, I only saw babies that were stillborn. It wasn't until I got to the cemetery and I saw the common burials, which I thought actually had come from a Planned Parenthood because it looked so horrible. I really did. But the advocacy part of this began with the birth of my child, who was born with disabilities. So I have learned to start advocating since 1985. And that is how, when God blessed me with this child with special needs, he was preparing me for this. Because when I was empowered to do my first memorial program for the babies at the cemetery, and I saw the women who came, they were past their childbearing years. They were still grieving. They had unresolved grief. I had post-abortive women say, why are you doing this for products of conception? And I unfortunately found out through the cemetery that many Catholic hospitals were using that term too. They were not using. And in the disability movement, that was one of the first things we were taught. We're going to change the perception of disabled people. We're going to do people first language. We want people to start seeing the person and not the disability. And I've given more than one, when I public speak, more than once say, this is what we need to do for our unborn babies. Every time you hear somebody say, oh, products of conception, oh, you mean an unborn child. That's what I said the whole time I was at the hospital in pathology departments, whatever, always correcting, making sure they understand. I don't see it as products of conception.
That's right. And that's what I said in the very beginning of this program, that our attitude and the phrases we use when we hear a woman has miscarried a baby is so important. You shouldn't just brush it off. This mother is grieving. And I think too often our language with the whole thing is like, oh, that phrase, oh, the nature took its course. I mean, why do they say that? To people say that to moms. That's the last thing they want to hear. They're grieving the death of their baby, So I think this ministry you have is marvelous. And I just hope our listeners here take advantage of the fact that they can go to miscarriedbaby.com. I think my producers put up your webpage there, and you can request one of those kits. And then if you need more help, Jill is here for you. And like you said, you just helped a couple in Pennsylvania. So you don't, this is not just meant for people in Indiana. And I have a hunch, the more liberal your state, the bigger uphill battle you're going to have to demand the remains of your baby. And I just think press the pause button, because very often, I just heard someone recently miscarried, and the doctor wanted the woman to go into, come in tomorrow morning, be at the hospital at this time, we'll do the procedure. She didn't even have a chance to process that my baby's, died, and I've lost my child. And so I think what you have to do, first of all, nothing terrible is going to happen if you wait a day or two. And that gives them time to seek people like you, Jill, and your assistants, and teach them how to be advocates for themselves and their baby, and then to have a proper burial. Do you know, it was a number of years ago, Father Pavone and I, we were traveling down in, I think it was North Carolina. And we were speaking at this one church, and a family came up to us at the end of the service and said, would you come with us tomorrow to the cemetery? And we said, sure, why? And she said, well, our miscarried baby was buried there, but tomorrow we're getting the stone put in, and we'd like Father Pavone to bless the stone. I mean, it was beautiful. The other, children, they had 4 other children, and this baby's name was Felicity, Jill. And I'll never forget it. I mean, this happened 20 years ago. All right. This story is 20 years old. And I said to the mom, I said, well, how old was little Felicity, when you lost her? You know what she said? 7 weeks. And imagine, at 7 weeks, she got the remains of little Felicity, and they had a Catholic priest. They did a mass for the baby, and then they went out to the cemetery, and they buried the baby. And now we got to see this beautiful stone they had made for that baby. And you could see for the family, it gave them such comfort to know that this is where their baby is, instead of this, who knows where kind of thing, So I really want to thank you for the service you're providing, because I think too many women feel like there's no one out there to help me. No one's out there to help me. And I wish you all the best, Jill. And again, if brothers and sisters, if you want more information, miscarriedbaby.com, Jill is there waiting to help you. And that's what we want you to do. Let's spread the word. So thanks for joining me. Okay, Jill. And I just continue to pray that more women get to this information before it's too late. So thanks for joining us today. Well, brothers and sisters, thank you too for joining me on Just Ask Janet. I know this is a difficult topic, but it's very often not addressed, and it needs to be. And so I'm hoping you will be ambassadors of this message. Miscarriedbaby.com, spread that word out there, because people like Jill, they're advocates to help you in case you find yourself in this situation. So this is Janet Morena, Executive Director of Priests for Life. Thank you for joining us for this program. God bless.